Namaste, 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 namaste. So let's just take you out of your busy lives. I know it's Sunday morning in America, but let's take a moment to sort of just gather the mind from wherever it's running. And the best way is not to do anything by force with the mind. Just notice the mind, notice where it's going. And notice yourself sitting here. And how do you feel in this seat? Right here on the surface that's holding you. Are there any energies in the body that are uncomfortable? Just notice it. Come to yourself. All of these ways of coming to you are part of loving you, being fully present. And notice your breath. And you notice I'm not closing my eyes. This is not a meditation. It's just living in the presence, in this sense of being there, caring for you. Our minds take us in so many different directions. We have habits of stress and uncomfortable emotions that are running through us habitually. And we need to counteract them. And we can do that moment to moment. It doesn't have to be some kind of special thing, like a special practice or special meditation. It's simply a way of living in self-love. And that is the cornerstone, the real foundation for the life of a yogi, the life of a spiritual person. We also, because we're so mind-based, we get these ideas about spiritual life, about how we should be. And then the old tendency is, whether it's subtle or gross, to sort of beat ourselves up into that. And that, of course, doesn't make any sense. It's more of a gathering ourselves together to be here. And then ultimately, once you've done this a little bit, once you've settled into yourself, you can bring your attention to the very core of the heart, the very center of your being, deeper than any emotion. So when we speak about heart, we're not speaking about a physical organ, we're not speaking about emotion. We're speaking about the deepest core, the place in us that we can say where God's presence is alive in us most tangibly. Of course, God's presence, there's no place where that is not. Or if you don't like the word God, use the word the supreme, the ultimate. Same thing. We don't have to have a form. But it's that core essence, that deepest place where we are always alive in profound, blissful love. And this is not a love for something, it's a love for everything. It is simply a state of being. So, just holding that kind of thought in mind, let yourself settle into the depth of your heart. And then think for a moment over maybe your last week. And there may have been some moments in the last week or the last day that come to your mind. And now in retrospect, you can see, is there any judgment that you have about yourself or others? Is there any tension that still lingers or that was there? And you can regard all of that with the utmost compassion. I saw something very interesting just about 2 hours ago. It's evening here in India, and I was sitting by the lake here in Nainital, and I saw two women, maybe in their 30s, and they had a small boy with them who was maybe 4 years old, 5 years old. And they bought from a street vendor something to eat. And they were sitting there, and then the boy did something, and that food spilled all over the ground. And I know what would happen in the West, or at least in the way I was brought up. There would be immediately a, don't do that, watch that. What's the matter with you? And the astonishing thing, which really goes just to cement what I'm really getting here in India so wonderfully, the amazing thing was that I observed them very closely, and there wasn't even the twitch of an eyelid. There was no reaction in those women to somehow give this boy an impression that he had done something wrong. It was just held in absolute acceptance. It's like to say, well, that's just what children do. They kick over containers with food, and the food is spoiled. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And, you know, there's a tiny little thing, one might say, but it's really indicative of the way Indian families operate. They operate from a place of unconditional love that we don't really know, or know very little of, in the West. It doesn't show much because they have, you know, normal relationships, and they have conflicts and all that. But there's an undertow of profound acceptance there. And that's what we need to reestablish within ourselves first. Then we can have it with others. So when you think back now, maybe over the last day or the last week, and you notice moments where there was some tension coming in, some kind of contracting, and then perhaps also a self-judgment about yourself in this situation. And just, I want you to revisit that and just relax it. Just notice, like you're this little boy, notice, well, that's just what my mind still does. My mind still kicks over food. My mind still judges me. My mind still gets uptight. And that's okay. So what I'm doing is I'm inviting you to take even this self-judgment and the harshness that is in our minds and our emotions sometimes, and wrap it up into this ball of love, this ball of unconditional acceptance. And the reason why I know you can do that is because that is the nature of our true being. We've learned that we need to be pushy, or we need to be tough on ourselves or on others in order to be better. And it has led to a life that carries a lot of tension. And it's our work now to smooth that out, to bring love and acceptance into those places in us that still are having a difficult time with it. And it's those very little things, those moments that don't show up on the big screen of our lives, you know, those little tensions, the little ways that we get like that with ourselves, you know? That's where the change happens a lot. And you hear me talk about this now, so this is not just for this moment. I hope that this idea of embracing yourself in a greater softness will actually stay with you, and that during the next days or weeks, you may remember that when you catch yourself getting tough on yourself, or also on others, of course, just like with this child. That we actually can be with ourselves and each other in this great accepting softness of unconditional love. That it's actually possible. To some people, this may seem like a little thing, but I think it's a real revolution that comes from deep inside of us and changes the very structure of our being. And it changes it not into something artificial, but it changes it back to the original way we are. Because love feels good because it's most true to who we are. So I want to give this to you kind of as an assignment to find these moments and become sensitized to that, because so many times we have moments of tension or judgmentalness, and they come and go so fast we don't hardly notice. And let me repeat this. The job is not to tell ourselves, I shouldn't be judgmental, I shouldn't be stressed. It's just more of the same. So the job is to actually allow that and to wrap it into warmth, into acceptance, into this deep, sweet taste of your heart that is definitely capable of unconditional acceptance and can have compassion, especially with those parts of us that have a hard time with compassion. So bring yourself into the heart for a moment. Bring your attention into the core of your being. And breathe into that deepest sweetness. That place, we can only call it place, we have limited words, outside of time and space, where we are love. Where we are happy all the time. Happy without a reason. Just because. Just because. So, and then I'd like to try to put into words an experience I had just 2 days ago. It's a little bit difficult because it sort of transcends what we usually do with words. But if you open your heart and you listen with your heart more than your mind, then maybe some of that, what I'm about to speak about, can just come directly into you, not through the mind, but directly into the heart. So 2 days ago, we had the darshan, which means we were in the presence of a very extraordinary being. Her name is Sri Siddhima, and she's the woman who, for many, many years, took care of our guru, Maharaji, Nimkaroli Baba, and was sort of the closest person to really just be with him in most of what he did and take care of his physical needs. And then after he passed in 1973, he put her in charge of 2 of his ashrams, where this never-ending stream of people, of devotees, would come to her, and she would just tirelessly take care of everyone. And it's interesting, this taking care of that I'm speaking about, because on the surface, it was just very practical. I was with her sometimes during those years, and it was just always like, have you eaten? Do you need more blankets for the night? Has it been cold? How are you doing? How's the family? And so on and so forth. This completely deep human interest in every single person who came to her. So that was what was visible on the surface. But there was an entirely different level that was not often spoken about, but it was felt very deeply. And that's what made her so incredibly special, because in her presence, because of the grace she had absorbed so deeply into her being by being so close to the great Nimkaroli Baba, she became a vessel of grace herself. And I remember in past years when I was with her, and again, on the surface, just the most normal things would happen, or as we do here, I would bow to her. I remember one time specifically I bowed, just a gesture of respect and honoring and adoration of the divine in someone, just like when we say namaste, which is a small way of doing the same thing. And at that time I bowed, and then I got up. And as I got up, something happened in my mind that wasn't a physical event, but I suddenly had a vision of the goddess Durga, which is the way she, particularly her spiritual essence, manifests. So these kinds of things would happen, where people would come to her with particular problems, and on the surface, there isn't much she can do about people's problems, of course. But somehow these problems then magically would resolve. A friend of mine came from America, and she had been with Nimkaroli Baba also. And she had big problems with her teenage daughter. She brought her daughter, who had some kind of mental issues going on. And they came, they stayed for a few days, saw Siddhima. And months, all those problems just dissolved themselves. There's nothing else had to happen. It was just, whew, and the child was fine. I remember my own case. I was here in 2007 and fell and twisted my ankle real bad. And it swelled up to about twice its size. And I knew, oh my gosh, this is going to take like 3 weeks to fix itself. I know that kind of stuff. Used to play basketball and get that. So I know how long it takes. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the mountains, where there isn't anything but a footpath even from the house to get to a street. How was I going to get down there? And no sooner did word go down to the ashram that I had that problem, that people came with, sort of folk remedies and messages and food and just this tremendous amount of love that's just was instantly happening. And still I thought I was in trouble. And about 6 hours later, without doing really anything, that swelling and that pain was completely gone. It just resolved itself like in no time. So it's these things that happen around a being like her. Now, the experience I want to share with you that happened 2 days ago was a little bit of a different kind. I was with her, and she is quite old now. She doesn't speak much at all anymore, and that's not really necessary, because this inner level of grace has become so powerful in her presence. So as I'm with her, I have this vision of what I might call the cosmic reality of love. So the vision was, if you imagine an enormous whirlpool, gigantic cosmic proportion whirlpool. And in this whirlpool, there are millions of souls being moved slowly deeper and deeper and deeper into the core of divine love and bliss. There are many people who are clinging to the rim, still in the illusion that we have to be in charge and control, that the ego is running the show. And my God, what would happen if I'd let go, if I'd surrender to that temptation, that invitation of love? And then there are those who get to taste a little bit more deeply. And they dare to do the crazy thing of letting go of that rim of ego domination. And they let go into this vortex, this gigantic vortex of love. And still we have the habits of that old ego-dominated life, where we think we have to be in charge, we have to do stuff, and unless we do it, it doesn't get done. And we are in charge of our sadhana and our spiritual enlightenment. Those habits still cling to us. And it's not that we shouldn't do anything, it's perfectly fine for us to engage in those practices that free us of the obstructions that cling to us, the habits that we have of self-sabotage, of stressful thoughts, of negative emotions, of the unconscious holding on to our unhappiness. That's where we need to practice. That's where the ego has a place, or maybe it's not the ego, but the refined ego has a place in engaging in practice, in making effort Absolutely. And yet there's this other dimension, this dimension of divine love, that we can sense, perhaps as a yearning, perhaps as a hope, perhaps as a reality that comes to us through the love of someone divine, someone like Siddhima, like Maharaji, like any of the great sages, like Jesus or Mary, like any of the gods that humanity has created in our own form, and whose being is able to transmit to us that divine love that is our true essence. And so through that, we gain the courage to let go of the rim of this gigantic vortex, to let go of ego-dominated life and surrender to love, surrender to God, surrender to God and us. And as we do, those old habits don't just disappear, but they become less and less dominant. And looking deeper into the center of this vortex, this giant cosmic whirlpool of love, we can find beings who are further down, who are deeper, steeped in this love than we are. And we can connect with them and create a personal relationship, a personal connection. And as I know from my own being, this is incredibly helpful. Because through these relationships, grace pours into our life. Guidance becomes something that is not some kind of theory of something that might happen to someone else, but a tangible, direct instruction that happens moment to moment. And what is instructing us? Through a sacred being, but our innermost core, because they are only pure reflections of that. And of course, that same guidance is directly available inside the heart. So if for a moment you close your eyes, picture, in whatever way it comes to you, this giant whirlpool of countless souls traveling into the center of love. And you among them. And you may sense that in this movement of love taking you home to yourself, any impulse of fear that tells you you need to be in control is absolutely unnecessary. And it's also very natural. And that impulse itself can be embraced by that love. So it can melt away and set you free to move peacefully, ever more peacefully, gently, blissfully, happily, into the very core of your being.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I contacted them today, but I haven't heard from them yet. So at this point, I don't know.
And a word about silence, stillness. Many times when we're still, we notice that the mind just keeps pulling us out of that stillness, saying in some way that it's not okay to just be. And yet, to be in this love is first of all profoundly healing for us. And beyond healing, it is a settling into the heart, into your peace. And I invite you to that. In a very important way. There's no time spent better than in just being. Being the love that you are. So let's go to a question that was sent by Rose. Can I have that question? Thank you. And it's right along the lines of what we've just been doing. The question is, Shanti Ramgiri, I'm wondering, is it possible to reach so deeply inward into relationship with the heart that one may no longer be pulled into the spectrum of mental illness diagnoses like mood disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar, and so on? It seems more and more as I meet people seeking peace, I find that they orient with these namings and constructs around them There are also a few presenting with disorders or symptoms or side effects that are arising from years on medication. Thank you.
Read again the first part.
Yeah. So let's go through this step by step. The first part again is it possible to reach so deeply inward into relationship with the heart that one may no longer be pulled into the spectrum of mental illness diagnoses, like mood disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar, etc. So I need to try to come to a somewhat detailed answer here. The first answer is absolutely yes. And the second answer is it's not possible for everyone. So in order to reach so deeply into the heart that it frees you, that the power of the heart, the power of love, which is really the greatest, most powerful medicine there is, that it can help you with such disorders, is there has to first be the intention to do that. Now, if you tell somebody, oh, you can do this and you'll be free of depression, one would think, oh, everybody would do it, okay? Not so. Because people have, to varying degrees, suffering from a problem. And then when we suffer, we have the intention to get free of it. But we also have the attachment to the suffering and to the way of being that it represents that may have a long history in us. So when the desire to become free of this problem is not strong enough, which is true for many people, then the traditional way of therapy and other ways they can find help is the best one for them. But there are those who, aside from having these kind of problems like anxiety, depression, etc., which are extremely common these days, have that great yearning for love. They perhaps for some of them, that yearning has come through despair. Despair is tough, but it does something inside of us. It gives us a real hunger for the end of despair, for the end of suffering. So in that way, despair can be curative, or it can begin a deeper process of healing than one that simply seeks to cover over some discomfort due to depression or anxiety and so on. So if this desire is there, and this desire can, on the other hand, also come from a spiritual impulse, a falling in love with the divine in one way or another, whether it's through an external form like we spoke about, or directly into the heart. Either way, we go into the same place of the heart. So when that is there, that profound thirst, profound hunger for a true paradigm shift, a true remedy, then to go deep into the heart is, in my understanding, the most powerful medicine. And it's not a medicine that fixes it for a little while. It fixes it for good. And it's not a light process. It's not something that happens like snapping your fingers. It's the recognition of the way depression, anxiety, etc., manifests, and it manifests in primarily two ways: through stressful emotions and negative thoughts. And if we know how to dissolve these, and then empowered by our yearning in the heart to be free, we go into this practice and we continue it, then most of the sort of garden variety of mental health issues can be taken care of. Rose also spoke about bipolar issues. Now, bipolar issues are deeply rooted in a true chemical imbalance, it seems. Let me talk about the chemical imbalance issue. Every thought or feeling we have creates a neurological and chemical effect in the brain. So if we have stressful thoughts or emotions enough of the time, then of course our brain chemistry will be slanted. And for that, medications can be a help to some extent, although they do not go to the core of the problem. But they give us a break, like especially when we talk about depression, for instance. Depression can be so debilitating that you simply cannot find in the grip of that kind of depression. Medication can be very helpful. And yes, it's overprescribed, and many people are kept on medications when it's really not the best option. And so medications often have a negative feeling in the spiritual community, but I don't agree with that. There are certainly places and people for whom they can be very important step in their improvement. So when you can bring your attention into the heart, when you can systematically remove the obstructions in the layer of thoughts and emotions, so the power of the heart can radiate through your whole being and can then be absorbed in every cell of your physical body, in any of the parts of your emotional body that need your help, and can help you to let go of patterns of stressful thinking. Then that great love of the heart can shine through you. And it can bring you to the place where the most subtle layer of mind, the layer of the stressful sense of separation, can part and show you the truth of your oneness with yourself, your oneness with all. And to begin the practice of heart sourcing, you can get a taste of that, and that taste can grow inside of you. And it can inspire you to go further. And then you can question concepts that are given to you, like diagnoses. I am the person who has this or that. I am liable to have chemical imbalances in my brain, and so on and so forth. Don't just believe all that stuff. At one point, it can be very helpful. It can show you what you can do, on a certain level. On another level, it can be completely destructive when you start to identify yourself with your greatest problem. How could that ever be true? In my own case, I was terribly depressed and anxious, and my self-esteem was permanently in the basement when I was younger. And of course, there was a part of me that identified with that because I'm so used to it. It was almost permanent with me. But I let it inspire me to identify myself as a yogi, as someone who, yes, had some issues, and I had quite a few. And that was the cause why I had to do what I had to do to set myself free. So that's an important part of this remedy of love. We need to identify as people who are able to do the things because of the problem, do the things we need to do in order to set ourselves free. And we, each and every one of us, have this power of the heart alive in us. And we have a path laid out in front of us that we can follow, find and follow. We can free it completely. So whatever the issues are that are bothering you, know that that's not what you are. You are in essence free, absolutely free. You are in essence already enlightened. That enlightened aspect is already present in each and every one of us. It's covered up by our stuff. So let's get busy. Remove the stuff. That's something we can do. And we, each and every one of us, are called to jump into this giant whirlpool of love, this part of the dance of the cosmic mother that we are all part of, where she calls home into herself, into that absolute love that is in each and every one of us. Those souls who recognize the need for it. Those souls who want love more than the million strategies that we've developed in response to fear. The love that lies dormant in us, that we touch on, just tiny little bits here and there in a lifetime. This gigantic presence of ever blissful love can heal and repair anything and guide us on our way home to ourselves, to the heart, to that place of profound and abiding peace. So take that knowledge and apply it into your life. Only then does it become real. If it's some thoughts in your mind about love, some nice stuff that you've heard and believe perhaps, it's pretty useless. But find those sometimes so small moments where you can encounter yourself and others with more love, where you can be of service, where you can embrace rather than judge or reject. Find those moments. And every time, you may not even be able to change yet, but you become aware of yourself, of an old pattern, of a way that doesn't really work for you anymore. You become aware of that in the light of that love, that consciousness inside of you. That is a victory right there. So I wish you lots and lots of these little victories, because over time they add up to the great victory of love in you. Namaste.